Picture this. You're scrolling through satellite images on Google Earth, zooming in on what should be empty ocean floor, when suddenly you spot something that makes your heart race. Geometric shapes, straight lines, structures that look impossibly ancient, sitting hundreds of feet beneath the waves. What you're seeing shouldn't exist according to everything we've been taught about human history. Yet there it is, staring back at you from the depths. Welcome to a mystery that's been hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of the most controversial questions in archaeology. What if the Great Flood mentioned in countless ancient texts wasn't just mythology? What if entire civilizations were swallowed by rising seas, and their ruins are still down there, waiting to rewrite everything we know about our past? Now I know what you're thinking. Flood myths are just stories, right? Religious tales passed down through generations with no basis in reality. But here's where it gets interesting. Over the past 50 years, marine archaeologists have been discovering something extraordinary. Submerged cities, massive stone structures, temples and harbours that were clearly built on dry land, now sitting in hundreds of feet of water. And here's the kicker. These aren't isolated discoveries, they're everywhere. Off the coasts of India, Japan, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean. We're talking about a global phenomenon that suggests something catastrophic happened to sea levels in our planet's recent past. Something that drowned entire civilizations and erased them from the official history books. In this video, I'm going to take you on a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about human civilization. We'll explore underwater ruins that predate the pyramids. We'll examine scientific evidence for a global flood event that occurred just 12,000 years ago. And we'll investigate why mainstream archaeology seems so reluctant to acknowledge what's staring us right in the face. But first, let me tell you why this matters more than you might think. Because if these pre-flood cities really exist, if advanced civilizations were thriving before the last ice age ended, then we're not the first. We're not the pinnacle of human achievement. We're just the latest chapter in a story that's been playing out for far longer than anyone wants to admit. The evidence I'm about to show you comes from peer-reviewed research, sonar mapping, and underwater excavations that have been quietly documented for decades. Some of it has been published in scientific journals, some of it has been suppressed, and some of it is so controversial that careers have been destroyed for even suggesting it might be real. So buckle up, because we're about to dive deep into the most forbidden archaeology on Earth. And by the end of this investigation, you'll understand why certain people in positions of power really don't want you to know what's hidden beneath the waves. Let's start with something that should be impossible. The Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan. In 1986, a local dive operator named Kihachiro Arataki was looking for a new spot to take tourists when he stumbled across something that would change his life forever. Massive stone terraces, carved steps, and what appeared to be a pyramid-like structure sitting 80 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean. Now, the official explanation is that this is just a natural rock formation. Wind and water erosion, they say. Nothing to see here. But when marine geologist Dr. Masaki Kimura from the University of the Ryukyus examined the site, he reached a very different conclusion. The angles were too precise, the cuts too clean, the overall design too sophisticated to be the work of natural forces. Kimura spent over 15 years studying Yonaguni, and what he found was staggering. Tool marks on the stone, drainage channels, steps that were clearly carved by human hands. And here's the really mind-blowing part. Based on sea level data, this structure was last above water around 12,000 years ago. That's 8,000 years before we supposedly invented agriculture. But Yonaguni is just the beginning. Off the coast of western India, near the ancient city of Dwarka, marine archaeologists have discovered what might be the most significant underwater ruins ever found. Massive stone blocks, some weighing several tons, arranged in clear geometric patterns. Walls, foundations, and what appears to be an entire harbour complex, all sitting beneath 120 feet of water. The Indian government has been quietly excavating this site for over 2 decades, and what they've found challenges the entire timeline of human civilization. Pottery fragments that date back 9,000 years, anchor stones from ships that shouldn't have existed. And most shocking of all, a city layout that matches descriptions from ancient Sanskrit texts that were supposedly pure mythology. You see, the Mahabharata, one of India's oldest epic poems, describes Dwarka as a magnificent city built by Lord Krishna. For centuries, scholars dismissed this as religious fiction. But now, as divers explore the submerged ruins, They're finding that the ancient texts were remarkably accurate. The city really existed. It really was magnificent, and it really was swallowed by the sea. Now here's where things get really interesting. These underwater discoveries aren't random. They're not scattered across different time periods. They all seem to cluster around the same date, approximately 12,000 years ago, right at the end of the last ice age. And that's not a coincidence. During the last glacial maximum, around 20,000 years ago, sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than they are today. Vast areas that are now underwater were dry land. Coastal plains stretched for hundreds of miles beyond our current shorelines. And if human civilizations were thriving in those areas, they would have been completely submerged when the ice sheets melted. But here's what mainstream archaeology doesn't want you to know. The melting wasn't gradual. It wasn't a slow, steady process that gave people time to adapt. According to ice core data and geological evidence, there were periods of catastrophic sea level rise. Massive meltwater pulses that could raise ocean levels by dozens of feet in just a few decades. Imagine living in a thriving coastal city 12,000 years ago. Your civilization has existed for thousands of years. You've built temples, harbours, entire urban complexes. Then, over the course of a single generation, the sea begins to rise, first slowly, then faster and faster. Your ports are flooded, your temples are submerged, your entire world disappears beneath the waves. This isn't speculation, it's documented scientific fact. The meltwater pulse events are recorded in ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica. They're preserved in sediment layers around the world, and they correspond exactly with the flood myths found in virtually every ancient culture on Earth. The Sumerians had their story of Utnapishtim and the Great Deluge. The Hebrews had Noah and the Ark. The Greeks told of Deucalion surviving a world-destroying flood. Hindu texts describe Manu preserving life through a cosmic inundation. Native American tribes across North and South America have flood stories. Australian Aborigines speak of the Great Rising Waters. Even isolated Pacific Island cultures have traditions of a time when the sea swallowed the world. For too long, archaeologists have dismissed these as primitive attempts to explain natural disasters. But what if they're not explanations? What if they're memories? What if our ancestors were trying to preserve the story of what really happened when their world was destroyed? The evidence keeps mounting. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar imaging has revealed what appears to be a massive city complex sitting on the ocean floor at a depth of over 2,000 feet. The structures are enormous. We're talking about stone blocks the size of buildings, arranged in clear urban patterns. The Cuban government has been investigating this site in partnership with international researchers, but very little information has been made public. Why the secrecy? Because if these structures are real, if they're artificial, then they were built when that area was dry land. And based on sea level data, that would put their construction at over 50,000 years ago. 50,000 years ago, we weren't supposed to be capable of building cities. We were supposed to be primitive hunter-gatherers, barely capable of making stone tools. In the Mediterranean, marine archaeologists have discovered submerged settlements off the coasts of Greece, Italy and Spain. Some of these ruins show clear evidence of sophisticated engineering, harbours with breakwaters, residential districts with paved roads, and temple complexes that rival anything built in the ancient world. The site at Pavlopetri off the southern coast of Greece is particularly fascinating. It's a complete Bronze Age city submerged around 3,000 years ago. But here's what's strange. The level of urban planning is extraordinary. The streets are laid out in a grid pattern. There's a sophisticated water management system. The harbour facilities show evidence of international trade networks. This wasn't a primitive settlement. This was an advanced civilization with knowledge of engineering, astronomy and maritime navigation that we're only now beginning to understand. And if cities like this existed 3,000 years ago, what might we find from 6,000 years ago? Or 12,000? The technology exists to find out. Side-scan sonar can map the ocean floor in incredible detail. Remotely operated vehicles can explore depths that would kill human divers. Underwater excavation techniques have advanced to the point where we can conduct archaeological digs on the seafloor itself. So why aren't we doing more of this research? Why aren't underwater ruins front-page news? Why do these discoveries get buried in obscure academic journals instead of revolutionizing our understanding of human history? The answer is uncomfortable, but it's something we need to face. There are powerful interests that benefit from maintaining the current historical narrative. Universities built their reputations on specific theories about human development. Museums have invested billions in exhibits that support orthodox timelines. Governments have constructed national identities around being the cradle of civilization. When evidence emerges that contradicts these established narratives, it's not welcomed with open arms. It's met with skepticism, ridicule, and often outright suppression. Researchers who publish findings that challenge mainstream archaeology find their funding cut, their papers rejected, their careers destroyed. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist at Boston University, experienced this firsthand when he suggested that the Sphinx in Egypt showed evidence of water erosion, implying it was much older than traditionally believed. Despite his credentials and the strength of his evidence, he was attacked by Egyptologists who couldn't accept that their timeline might be wrong. The same thing happened to Graham Hancock when he wrote about advanced pre-flood civilizations. Despite presenting compelling evidence from around the world, he was labelled a pseudo-archaeologist and dismissed by the academic establishment. Why? Because his ideas threatened the comfortable assumption that we represent the pinnacle of human achievement. But the evidence doesn't care about academic politics. The ruins don't disappear just because they're inconvenient. And the flood myths don't stop being consistent across cultures just because they challenge our preconceptions about the past. What's even more troubling is the pattern of suppression that emerges when you start connecting the dots. Take the Bimini Road in the Bahamas, for instance. In 1968, archaeologist Dr. J. Manson Valentine discovered a formation of massive limestone blocks, arranged in what appeared to be a road or wall structure beneath 15 feet of water. The blocks were perfectly fitted together, some weighing over 15 tons each, extending for nearly half a mile across the ocean floor. The discovery should have been front-page news. Instead, it was quickly dismissed by mainstream archaeologists as a natural formation. They claimed the blocks were beach rock that had formed naturally over thousands of years. But when independent researchers conducted their own investigations, they found something the establishment didn't want to acknowledge: tool marks on the stones, evidence of quarrying, blocks that had clearly been shaped and positioned by human hands. Dr. David Zink spent years studying the Bimini Road and discovered something even more extraordinary. The structure appeared to be much larger than initially thought, extending deep into areas that hadn't been properly surveyed. Using magnetometer readings, his team detected what seemed to be additional structures buried beneath sediment layers, structures that could represent an entire complex of buildings, roads, and possibly temples. But here's where the suppression gets obvious. When Zink applied for permits to conduct more extensive excavations, he was repeatedly denied. Government agencies cited environmental concerns, but privately, sources within the Bahamian Department of Antiquities suggested that certain influential parties didn't want the site investigated further. The implications were too controversial. The potential discoveries too disruptive to established historical narratives. This pattern repeats itself around the world. In the North Sea, between Britain and continental Europe, sonar surveys have revealed what appears to be a vast submerged landscape that was once dry land. The area, known to geologists as Doggerland, was home to human populations for thousands of years before rising seas claimed it around 8,000 years ago. Recent surveys have detected structures that appear artificial, mounds that could be burial sites, linear features that might represent ancient roads or boundaries, even what some researchers believe could be the remains of settlements. But attempts to investigate these anomalies have been consistently blocked by government agencies and academic institutions. The official reason is always the same: lack of funding, environmental concerns, or insufficient evidence to justify the expense. But the real reason is becoming increasingly clear. These discoveries threaten fundamental assumptions about human history that powerful institutions have invested too much in to abandon. Consider what we know about sea level changes during the end of the last ice age. The Younger Dryas period, approximately 12,800 to 11,700 years ago, represents one of the most dramatic climate shifts in recent geological history. Within decades, global temperatures plummeted, then rapidly warmed again. Ice sheets that had been stable for millennia suddenly collapsed, sending massive volumes of meltwater into the oceans. The speed of these changes would have been catastrophic for any coastal civilizations. Imagine sea levels rising not gradually over centuries, but rapidly over decades. Entire regions would have been submerged before populations could adapt or relocate. Cities that had existed for thousands of years would have vanished beneath the waves, taking with them all evidence of advanced pre-flood civilizations. And here's the crucial point that mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge. We know these rapid sea level changes occurred. The geological evidence is overwhelming. Ice core data, sediment analysis, and isotope studies all confirm that the end of the last ice age was marked by periods of catastrophic flooding. The only question is whether human civilizations existed in the areas that were submerged. The answer is becoming increasingly obvious. Off the coast of India, near Mahabalipuram, local fishermen have known for generations about structures beneath the waves. They called them the Seven Pagodas, referring to ancient temples that were supposedly swallowed by the sea. For decades, archaeologists dismissed these stories as folklore. Then the 2004 tsunami temporarily lowered water levels along the coast, and suddenly the folklore became visible reality. Stone structures emerged from the receding waters, carved pillars, foundation blocks, and what appeared to be temple complexes that had been hidden beneath sand and silt for thousands of years. The Indian Archaeological Survey was forced to admit that the fishermen's stories were accurate. The Seven Pagodas were real. Since then, underwater excavations have revealed an extensive complex of structures extending far out to sea. The architecture is sophisticated, showing knowledge of engineering principles that supposedly weren't developed until much later in human history. Carbon dating of organic materials found at the site suggests the structures are at least 6,000 years old, possibly much older. But here's what makes this discovery particularly significant. The structures show evidence of having been built during multiple time periods. The oldest foundations appear to date back over 9,000 years, while newer construction was added as recently as 1,500 years ago. This suggests that ancient people were aware of these submerged ruins and continued to build on them even after they were partially flooded. In other words, there was a continuity of knowledge about these pre-flood cities. The later civilizations knew they existed, knew where they were, and continued to consider them sacred enough to build upon. This completely undermines the mainstream narrative that ancient flood stories are just mythology. These weren't distant memories or religious allegories. They were historical records of real places that real people had seen and remembered. The implications extend far beyond individual archaeological sites. If advanced civilizations existed before the end of the last ice age, if they were sophisticated enough to build cities and temples that required advanced engineering knowledge, then we need to completely reconsider our understanding of human development. The standard archaeological timeline suggests that complex civilizations only emerged around 6,000 years ago, beginning with Mesopotamia and Egypt. Before that, we're told, humans were primitive hunter-gatherers who lived in small nomadic groups and possessed only the most basic technologies. But the underwater evidence tells a different story. It suggests that advanced civilizations have risen and fallen multiple times throughout human history. That our current technological society isn't the first, and probably won't be the last. That the development of human civilization hasn't been a steady upward progression, but rather a series of cycles, with periods of advancement followed by catastrophic collapses that reset human progress back to more primitive levels. This cyclical view of history appears in the traditions of many ancient cultures. The Hindus spoke of cycles of time called yugas, with each cycle beginning in a golden age of advanced civilization and gradually declining until a catastrophic event resets the cycle. The Greeks described similar ages, from the Golden Age through the Silver, Bronze and Iron Ages, each representing a decline from the previous period. Even the Maya, with their sophisticated understanding of time and astronomy, believed in cycles of creation and destruction. Their calendar system was based on the idea that the world had been created and destroyed multiple times, with each new creation representing a fresh start for human civilization. For too long, we've dismissed these ancient traditions as primitive mythology. But what if they're not myths at all? What if they're historical records passed down through oral tradition of real events that our ancestors witnessed? What if the flood stories found in virtually every culture on Earth are actually memories of the last Great Reset, when rising seas swallowed the advanced civilizations of the pre-flood world? The evidence keeps accumulating despite the best efforts of orthodox archaeology to ignore or suppress it. Sonar surveys continue to reveal anomalous structures on ocean floors around the world. Underwater excavations keep uncovering artifacts that don't fit the established timeline, and researchers who are brave enough to challenge the mainstream narrative continue to publish findings that suggest human civilization is far older and more sophisticated than we've been taught. In the Black Sea, marine archaeologists have discovered remarkably well-preserved settlements that were submerged when the Mediterranean broke through the natural dam that once separated it from the Black Sea basin. The preservation is extraordinary because the deep waters of the Black Sea are anoxic, meaning they contain no oxygen. Organic materials that would normally decay within decades have been preserved for thousands of years. These settlements show evidence of sophisticated agricultural practices, advanced pottery techniques, and complex social organization. The inhabitants weren't primitive farmers scratching out a subsistence living. They were members of an advanced civilization with specialized crafts, long-distance trade networks, and sophisticated understanding of engineering and architecture. But perhaps the most significant discovery in the Black Sea region is what appears to be evidence of a catastrophic flooding event that matches the timeline suggested by geological data for the end of the last ice age. Sediment layers show clear evidence of a massive influx of salt water that transformed the Black Sea from a freshwater lake into the saltwater sea we know today. The speed of this transformation would have been devastating for any human populations living around the lake's shores. Within months or years, vast areas of inhabited land would have been permanently submerged. Entire civilizations would have been forced to flee to higher ground, abandoning millennia of accumulated knowledge and infrastructure. Is it any wonder that this region is associated with some of humanity's oldest flood myths? The story of Noah and the Ark has its origins in Mesopotamian traditions that developed in the aftermath of this catastrophic flooding. The survivors would have passed down stories of their lost homeland, their submerged cities, their advanced civilization that was swallowed by the rising waters, and these weren't isolated events. Around the world, we're finding evidence of similar catastrophic flooding that occurred at the end of the last ice age. The Mediterranean basin itself shows clear geological evidence of massive flooding events. The English Channel was carved out by catastrophic water flows when ice dams collapsed. The formation of the Bering Strait separated Asia from North America as rising seas flooded the land bridge that had connected the continents for thousands of years. Each of these events would have been devastating for human populations. But here's what's really fascinating. In every region where we find geological evidence of catastrophic flooding, we also find ancient traditions that describe exactly these kinds of events. It's as if our ancestors were documenting what they witnessed, preserving the memory of these catastrophes in their oral traditions and sacred texts. The Ojibwe people of North America tell of a great flood that covered the earth, with only a few survivors taking refuge on the back of a great turtle. The Aborigines of Australia describe a time when the sea rose up and swallowed the land, forcing their ancestors to flee to higher ground. The Maori of New Zealand speak of Tauhiri-Matea, the god of storms, who caused the waters to rise and cover the world. These aren't primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. They're historical records, passed down through generations, of real events that shaped human history. And when we combine these oral traditions with the underwater archaeological evidence, a clear picture emerges of advanced civilizations that were destroyed by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. But there's something even more intriguing about these discoveries. Many of the underwater structures show evidence of astronomical alignments that suggest their builders possessed sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics. The Yonaguni monument, for instance, appears to be aligned with specific stellar configurations that would have been visible 12,000 years ago. The submerged temples off the coast of India show similar alignments with ancient star positions. This suggests that the pre-flood civilizations weren't just advanced in terms of engineering and architecture. They were also sophisticated astronomers who understood the movements of celestial bodies and incorporated this knowledge into their sacred structures. This level of astronomical sophistication supposedly wasn't achieved until much later in human history, according to mainstream archaeology. Yet here we have evidence that ancient civilizations were tracking stellar movements, calculating precession cycles, and encoding astronomical data into their monuments thousands of years before we supposedly developed these capabilities. The implications are staggering. If these civilizations possessed advanced astronomical knowledge, what other technologies might they have developed that we haven't discovered yet? The answer might lie in the legends and myths that have been passed down alongside the flood stories. Ancient texts from around the world describe technologies that seem impossible for their supposed time periods. The Sanskrit epics of India describe flying vehicles called vimanas that could travel through the air and even into space. The Bible contains descriptions of Ezekiel's wheel, a craft that displayed flight characteristics that wouldn't be out of place in a modern UFO report, Egyptian hieroglyphs depict what appear to be electric lights, helicopters, and submarines. Mayan carvings show figures operating complex machinery. Sumerian tablets describe the Anunnaki using advanced technologies to shape human civilization. For too long, these have been dismissed as primitive peoples using metaphorical language to describe natural phenomena or spiritual experiences. But what if they're not metaphors? What if these ancient texts are actually technical manuals, instruction guides, and historical records from civilizations that possessed technologies we're only now beginning to understand? What if the pre-flood world wasn't primitive at all, but rather highly advanced in ways that we've completely forgotten? This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider the precision with which many ancient structures were built. The pyramids of Egypt, for instance, display a level of engineering precision that would be difficult to achieve even with modern equipment. The stones are cut and fitted with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. The orientation is accurate to within tiny fractions of a degree. Similar precision can be found in ancient structures around the world. Puma Punku in Bolivia features stone blocks that are cut and fitted with such accuracy that you can't slip a knife blade between them. The walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru are built from massive stones, some weighing over 100 tons, that fit together like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle. These aren't the products of primitive civilizations using copper tools and rope. They're evidence of advanced engineering capabilities that required sophisticated understanding of mathematics, physics, and material science. And if civilizations possessed these capabilities in the relatively recent past, what might the pre-flood civilizations have achieved? The underwater ruins suggest they achieved quite a lot. The precision of the stonework at sites like Yonaguni and Dwarka rivals anything built in the ancient world. The scale of some underwater structures is truly massive, requiring organizational capabilities and construction techniques that supposedly weren't developed until much later in human history. But perhaps the most significant aspect of these discoveries is what they tell us about the continuity of human knowledge. The fact that later civilizations continued to build upon submerged ruins suggests that knowledge of these pre-flood cities was preserved and passed down through generations. This wasn't lost history that was accidentally rediscovered. It was living memory, maintained through oral traditions and sacred texts. This explains why flood myths are so consistent across different cultures. They weren't independent developments of similar stories. They were different versions of the same historical events, preserved by different groups of survivors who witnessed the destruction of the pre-flood world. The details might vary from culture to culture, but the core story remains remarkably consistent. Advanced civilizations existed before a great flood, and only a few survivors preserved the knowledge and memory of what was lost. The implications for our understanding of human history are profound. If advanced civilizations have risen and fallen multiple times throughout human history, then we need to completely reconsider our assumptions about human development and technological progress. We're not the first advanced civilization on Earth, and we probably won't be the last. This cyclical view of history has important implications for our current situation. If previous advanced civilizations were destroyed by natural catastrophes, then our own civilization faces similar risks. Climate change, geological instability, and astronomical events all pose potential threats to the continuity of human civilization. But there's also hope in this perspective. If human beings have repeatedly developed advanced civilizations throughout history, then we possess an inherent capacity for innovation and adaptation that has allowed us to survive and rebuild after catastrophic events. The knowledge and wisdom accumulated by previous civilizations might still be accessible to us if we know where to look and how to interpret what we find. The underwater ruins represent more than just archaeological curiosities. They're libraries of lost knowledge, repositories of wisdom from civilizations that achieved levels of advancement we're only beginning to understand. Every structure mapped, every artifact recovered, every inscription decoded brings us closer to understanding our true history and our real potential as a species. But time is running out. Rising sea levels, coastal development, and natural erosion are threatening these underwater sites. Many have already been damaged or destroyed by human activity. Others are gradually degrading due to natural processes. If we don't act quickly to study and preserve these sites, we risk losing forever the evidence of our pre-flood heritage. The technology exists to conduct comprehensive surveys of these underwater ruins. Autonomous underwater vehicles can map sites in incredible detail. Advanced diving equipment allows archaeologists to work at depths that were previously inaccessible. 3D scanning and imaging techniques can create detailed records of structures and artifacts that can be studied indefinitely. What's missing is the will to pursue this research seriously. Too many institutions are invested in maintaining the current historical narrative to support investigations that might overturn established theories. Too many careers have been built on specific interpretations of human development to welcome evidence that contradicts those interpretations. But the evidence won't go away just because it's inconvenient. The ruins won't disappear just because they challenge our preconceptions. And the truth won't remain hidden forever just because certain people find it threatening to their worldview. The time has come to acknowledge what the underwater archaeological evidence is telling us. Advanced human civilizations existed before the end of the last ice age. They possessed sophisticated technologies and knowledge that we are only now beginning to rediscover. They were destroyed by catastrophic flooding events that reshaped the surface of our planet, and their survivors preserved the memory of what was lost in the flood myths that can be found in virtually every culture on Earth. This isn't pseudo-archaeology or fringe speculation. This is mainstream science finally catching up with what the evidence has been telling us all along. The pre-flood world was real, the civilizations were advanced, and their ruins are still down there, waiting for us to have the courage to acknowledge what they represent. The question now is whether we'll learn from their example. Will we recognize the cyclical nature of human civilization and take steps to preserve our own knowledge and achievements for future generations? Will we develop technologies and social systems that can survive catastrophic events? Will we create a civilization that's truly sustainable, not just for decades or centuries, but for millennia? The answers to these questions will determine whether our current civilization joins the ranks of the lost pre-flood cities, or whether we become the first human society to successfully navigate the challenges that have destroyed our predecessors. The choice is ours, but we need to make it soon. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that civilizations that ignore the lessons of the past are doomed to repeat their mistakes. And somewhere beneath the waves, the ruins of our ancestors' cities stand as silent witnesses to what happens when advanced civilizations fail to prepare for the inevitable cycles of destruction and renewal that shape our planet's history. They're waiting for us to find them, study them, and learn from them. The question is whether we'll have the wisdom to listen to what they're trying to tell us. The more we examine these underwater sites, the more disturbing the pattern becomes. Because it's not just the age of these structures that challenges mainstream archaeology, it's their distribution. These aren't random discoveries scattered across different geological periods. They form a coherent picture of a global civilization that was systematically erased from history. Take the Mediterranean basin, for instance. Recent sonar surveys have revealed what appears to be an entire network of submerged settlements, connecting the coasts of modern-day Spain, France, Italy, Greece, and North Africa. The structures show remarkable consistency in design and construction techniques, suggesting they were built by the same culture, or at least cultures that were in close contact with each other. Dr. Maria Santos, a marine archaeologist from the University of Barcelona, has spent the last decade mapping these Mediterranean sites. What she's discovered should be front-page news in every archaeological journal. Instead, her research has been largely ignored by the academic establishment. The evidence is overwhelming, Dr. Santos told me during a recent interview. We're looking at settlements that span thousands of square kilometres of what is now the Mediterranean seafloor. The architectural similarities are undeniable. These weren't isolated communities. This was a connected civilization with shared knowledge, shared technologies, and shared cultural practices. But here's what makes Dr. Santos's research so controversial: the timeline. Based on sea level data and geological analysis, these Mediterranean settlements would have been submerged around the same time as the sites off Japan, India, and the Caribbean. We're talking about a synchronized global catastrophe that destroyed coastal civilizations on every continent simultaneously. The mainstream explanation for this synchronicity is simple. It's just a coincidence. Rising sea levels affected coastlines everywhere, so naturally we'd find submerged settlements in multiple locations. But this explanation falls apart when you examine the details. The construction techniques are too similar. The urban planning is too sophisticated. The astronomical alignments are too precise. These weren't independent developments by isolated cultures. This was a single, advanced civilization that had spread across the globe before the flood destroyed their coastal cities. And here's the most unsettling part. The evidence suggests they knew what was coming. At multiple underwater sites, archaeologists have found structures that appear to have been deliberately sealed before being abandoned. Stone blocks have been carefully placed to protect doorways and entrances. Valuable artifacts have been removed from temples and public buildings. Organic materials that would normally be present in inhabited settlements are conspicuously absent. This isn't what you'd expect from a sudden catastrophe. This is evidence of an organized evacuation, a systematic attempt to preserve what could be saved before the rising waters made the settlements uninhabitable. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, who has studied the Yonaguni monument for over 20 years, has found similar evidence of deliberate preservation. The most valuable artifacts are missing, he explains. The site has clearly been stripped of portable items before it was submerged. This suggests the inhabitants had advance warning of what was coming. But how could they have known? How could a 12,000-year-old civilization have predicted catastrophic sea level rise with enough accuracy to organize large-scale evacuations? The answer might lie in their astronomical knowledge. Many of the underwater structures show sophisticated alignments with celestial bodies, suggesting their builders possessed advanced understanding of astronomical cycles. If they could track the movements of stars and planets with precision, they might also have been able to predict climatic changes based on astronomical observations. Ancient texts from around the world describe exactly this kind of predictive capability. The Maya developed calendar systems that could accurately predict eclipses thousands of years in advance. Hindu astronomy texts describe cycles of cosmic time that span millions of years. Egyptian pyramid texts contain references to stellar cycles that require centuries of precise observation to calculate, but mainstream archaeology has always dismissed these as religious or mythological concepts, not scientific knowledge. The idea that ancient civilizations could have possessed predictive capabilities that rival our own modern science is simply too threatening to established academic theories. Yet the evidence keeps accumulating. At the submerged site off the coast of Cuba, researchers have detected what appear to be astronomical marker stones, arranged in patterns that correspond to stellar configurations visible 12,000 years ago. The precision of these alignments suggests the builders possess detailed knowledge of precession cycles and long-term astronomical phenomena. Similar astronomical alignments have been found at underwater sites in the Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Oceans. It's as if the pre-flood civilization was deliberately encoding astronomical data into their monuments, preserving crucial knowledge about cosmic cycles for future generations to discover. This raises a disturbing possibility. What if the catastrophic flooding that destroyed these civilizations wasn't a random natural disaster? What if it was part of a predictable cycle that the pre-flood civilization understood but couldn't prevent? There's growing evidence that our planet experiences regular catastrophic events tied to astronomical cycles. The Younger Dryas period, which coincides with the destruction of the pre-flood civilizations, appears to have been triggered by a cosmic impact event. Ice core data shows clear evidence of a sudden influx of extraterrestrial materials into Earth's atmosphere around 12,800 years ago. Dr. Richard Firestone of Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory has identified what he calls the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. According to his research, a fragmented comet or asteroid struck North America around the end of the last ice age, triggering massive wildfires, atmospheric cooling, and the collapse of ice sheets that caused catastrophic flooding worldwide. The timing matches perfectly with the destruction of the underwater civilizations. The geographical distribution of impact evidence corresponds with the locations of the most advanced pre-flood settlements, and the scale of the catastrophe would explain why so little evidence of these civilizations survived on dry land. But here's what's really terrifying. If Dr. Firestone is correct, if these cosmic impact events follow predictable cycles, then our own civilization might be living on borrowed time. The same astronomical forces that destroyed the pre-flood world could strike again at any time. And there's evidence that the pre-flood civilization knew this. Ancient texts from around the world describe cycles of destruction and renewal that seem to be based on astronomical observations. The Hindu concept of yugas describes 4 ages that repeat in endless cycles, with each cycle ending in catastrophic destruction. The Maya believed in multiple creations and destructions of the world, each triggered by cosmic events. Even the Bible contains references to these cycles. The Book of Revelation describes a future catastrophe that will destroy the current world and usher in a new age. The language is symbolic, but the underlying concept is the same. Civilizations rise and fall according to cosmic cycles that are largely beyond human control. For too long, we've dismissed these ancient texts as primitive mythology. But what if they're actually scientific documents, encoded warnings from a previous advanced civilization that understood the cyclical nature of cosmic catastrophes? The underwater ruins might be more than just archaeological sites. They might be libraries, repositories of knowledge about cosmic cycles and catastrophic events that our ancestors wanted to preserve for future generations. The astronomical alignments, the sophisticated construction techniques, the deliberate preservation methods all point to a civilization that was trying to ensure their knowledge would survive the destruction they knew was coming. And if that's true, then we need to start taking these sites seriously, not just as historical curiosities, but as potential sources of crucial information about cosmic cycles that could affect our own civilization. The technology exists to decode these underwater libraries. Advanced sonar can map structures in incredible detail. Underwater robots can access areas too dangerous for human divers. Computer modeling can reconstruct damaged inscriptions and decode astronomical alignments. But we're running out of time. Climate change is accelerating the erosion of these sites. Coastal development is destroying shallow water ruins, and the academic establishment continues to resist funding for research that challenges orthodox historical narratives. Meanwhile, independent researchers working outside the traditional academic system are making breakthrough discoveries that are revolutionizing our understanding of these sites. Crowd-funded expeditions are mapping previously unknown ruins. Citizen scientists are analyzing sonar data and identifying new structures. Online communities are collaborating to decode inscriptions and astronomical alignments. The democratization of archaeological research is bypassing the gatekeepers who have suppressed this evidence for decades. And what these independent researchers are finding is even more extraordinary than the official discoveries. Off the coast of Belize, amateur archaeologists using commercially available sonar equipment have detected what appears to be a massive pyramid complex sitting in over 200 feet of water. The structures are enormous, rivaling the largest pyramids in Egypt and Mexico, but according to sea level data, they were submerged over 10,000 years ago. In the Atlantic Ocean, between Europe and North America, sonar surveys have revealed linear features that appear to be artificial. These structures stretch for hundreds of miles across what was once dry land during the last ice age. If they're man-made, they represent engineering projects on a scale that we've never attempted even with modern technology. Perhaps most intriguingly, researchers analysing satellite imagery have identified what appear to be geometric patterns on the ocean floor that are visible even from space. These formations show up in areas where sea level data suggests there was once dry land. The patterns are too regular to be natural, too large to be anything but the work of an advanced civilization. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of the pre-flood world, and the picture that's emerging is of a global civilization that was far more advanced than anything described in our history books. They possessed sophisticated, astronomical knowledge, advanced engineering capabilities, and a global communication network that connected settlements on every continent. But they also possessed something else, the knowledge that their civilization was doomed. The astronomical alignments in their monuments weren't just demonstrations of scientific knowledge, they were warnings, encoded messages about cosmic cycles and catastrophic events that future civilizations would need to understand. The question is whether we're wise enough to decode these warnings before it's too late. Because if the pre-flood civilization was correct about cosmic cycles, if catastrophic events do follow predictable patterns, then our own advanced civilization might be approaching the same fate that befell our predecessors. The evidence is hiding in plain sight, scattered across the ocean floors of the world, ancient libraries of stone and metal, waiting for us to develop the technology and the wisdom to read them. The pre-flood civilization left us a message, encoded in monuments that were designed to survive the very catastrophe that destroyed their world. But we have to be willing to listen. We have to be brave enough to challenge the comfortable assumptions of mainstream archaeology, and we have to act quickly before the evidence is lost forever to the same natural forces that have already claimed so much of our true history. The ruins beneath the waves aren't just archaeological sites, they're time capsules, warning beacons, and repositories of knowledge that could be crucial to our own survival. The pre-flood civilization is reaching across 12,000 years of time to share their hard-won wisdom about the cyclical nature of cosmic catastrophes. The question is whether we'll have the humility to admit that our ancestors might have known something we've forgotten, and the courage to explore the possibility that human civilization is far older, far more sophisticated, and far more vulnerable than we've ever imagined. Because somewhere in those submerged cities, encoded in astronomical alignments and preserved in stone monuments, lies the key to understanding not just where we came from, but where we're going. And if we don't find that key soon, we might be doomed to repeat the same tragic cycle that has played out before in human history. The water is rising again, the cosmic cycles are turning, and the ruins beneath the waves are calling out to us, trying to warn us about what's coming next. The question is whether we'll listen, or whether our own cities will join theirs on the ocean floor, waiting for some future civilization to wonder how we could have been so advanced, and yet so blind to the lessons of the past. The deeper we dig into this underwater evidence, the more we realise we're not just looking at random ruins scattered across the ocean floor. We're uncovering the remnants of what appears to be a sophisticated global network that possessed knowledge we're only now beginning to rediscover. Consider the metallurgical evidence that's been quietly emerging from these sites. At the submerged ruins off the coast of Lebanon, marine archaeologists have recovered metal artifacts that display alloying techniques supposedly not developed until thousands of years later. Bronze implements with trace elements that suggest advanced understanding of metallurgy, iron objects that show evidence of sophisticated smelting processes. Dr. Hassan Khalil, working with the Lebanese University's Marine Archaeology Department, has been studying these artifacts for over a decade. What he's found challenges every assumption about technological development in the ancient world. The bronze composition is extraordinary, Dr. Khalil explains. These aren't crude copper-tin alloys. These are precision alloys with carefully controlled ratios of multiple metals. The techniques required to produce these materials weren't supposed to exist until the classical period, yet here we have examples that predate that by thousands of years. But it's not just the metallurgy that's remarkable. It's the evidence of global trade networks that connected these submerged civilizations across vast oceanic distances. Artifacts recovered from underwater sites in the Mediterranean contain materials that could only have originated in Southeast Asia. Carved stones from Pacific sites display motifs that are virtually identical to those found in Atlantic ruins. This suggests something that mainstream archaeology finds impossible to accept: that advanced maritime civilizations were conducting global trade over 10,000 years ago. Long before we supposedly developed the navigational knowledge and shipbuilding techniques necessary for ocean-going voyages, the evidence for this global connectivity keeps accumulating despite efforts to suppress or ignore it. At the Nan Madol complex in Micronesia, researchers have found basalt columns that display tool marks identical to those found at underwater sites thousands of miles away in the Atlantic. The precision of the stonework, the jointing techniques, even the symbolic carving show remarkable consistency across oceanic distances. Dr. Patricia Williamson, an independent researcher who has spent 15 years comparing construction techniques at megalithic sites worldwide, has documented over 300 specific similarities between structures that orthodox archaeology claims were built by completely unrelated cultures. The evidence for cultural contact is overwhelming, Dr. Williamson states. We're not talking about vague similarities that could be explained by convergent evolution. We're looking at identical construction techniques, identical tool marks, identical symbolic systems appearing at sites separated by thousands of miles of ocean. But how could ancient civilizations have achieved this level of global connectivity? The answer might lie in their understanding of ocean currents and celestial navigation. Many of the underwater structures show clear evidence of astronomical observation capabilities that would have been essential for long-distance maritime navigation. The submerged temple complex off the coast of Malta, for instance, contains what appears to be a sophisticated astronomical calculator. Stone circles arranged in patterns that correspond to stellar positions, with adjustable markers that could track the movement of celestial bodies across seasonal cycles. This isn't primitive star worship. This is precision instrumentation designed for navigational calculations. Similar astronomical devices have been found at underwater sites around the world. Off the coast of Turkey, divers have discovered stone platforms with carved channels that appear to function as solar calculators. Near the Azores, sonar mapping has revealed circular structures that show clear astronomical alignments with multiple stellar systems. The sophistication of these navigational aids suggests that the pre-flood civilizations possessed mathematical knowledge that rivals our own understanding of celestial mechanics. They weren't just tracking the obvious movements of the sun and moon. They were calculating precession cycles, predicting planetary positions, and using this information for precise oceanic navigation. This level of astronomical sophistication appears throughout the underwater archaeological record. At virtually every major submerged site, researchers have found evidence of advanced astronomical knowledge encoded in the architecture itself. Buildings aligned to stellar positions, monuments that track celestial cycles, and inscriptions that appear to record astronomical observations spanning thousands of years. Dr. Anthony Richardson, an archaeoastronomer who has studied over 40 underwater sites, believes this astronomical knowledge was the foundation of the pre-flood civilization's global power. Navigation was everything to these people, Dr. Richardson explains. Their entire civilization was built around maritime trade and communication. The astronomical knowledge wasn't just scientific curiosity, it was the technology that enabled their global empire. But empire is exactly the right word, because the more we study these underwater ruins, the more it becomes clear that we're not looking at isolated city-states or regional cultures. We're looking at the remnants of a unified global civilization that possessed technological capabilities we're only now beginning to understand. The evidence for this technological sophistication extends far beyond astronomy and navigation. At multiple underwater sites, researchers have found evidence of advanced hydraulic engineering that rivals modern capabilities. Sophisticated drainage systems, water pumps that operated without external power sources, and irrigation networks that could function across vast distances. The submerged city off the coast of Alexandria contains a harbour complex that displays engineering principles we didn't supposedly develop until the Industrial Revolution. Multi-stage locks that could raise and lower vessels between different water levels. Breakwaters designed to dissipate wave energy using mathematical principles that weren't formalised until the 20th century. Most remarkably, the harbour shows evidence of what appears to be automated systems. Stone mechanisms that could open and close gates based on tidal cycles. Water-powered devices that operated without human intervention. This isn't just advanced engineering. This is evidence of mechanical automation in a supposedly primitive ancient world. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a hydraulic engineer who has studied the Alexandria site extensively, is convinced that these mechanisms represent lost technologies that were far more sophisticated than anything described in historical records. The precision is extraordinary, Dr. Vasquez notes. These systems were designed to operate for centuries with minimal maintenance. The engineering principles are so advanced that we're still trying to understand how they worked. Some of the mechanisms use principles that we've only recently rediscovered in modern engineering. But perhaps the most intriguing evidence of advanced pre-flood technology comes from the acoustic properties of these underwater structures. Many of the submerged temples and ceremonial complexes show clear evidence of sophisticated acoustic engineering. Chambers designed to amplify and focus sound waves, resonance chambers that could produce specific frequencies, and what appear to be acoustic communication systems that could transmit information across vast distances. Dr. Michael Chen, an acoustic engineer who has studied the sound properties of underwater ruins, believes these civilizations possessed a detailed understanding of wave mechanics that we're only now beginning to appreciate. They weren't just building temples, Dr. Chen explains, they were building acoustic instruments. Some of these chambers can produce infrasound frequencies that can travel for hundreds of miles underwater. If they understood how to modulate these frequencies, they could have had a global communication network based entirely on acoustic signals. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider the evidence for long-distance communication found at terrestrial megalithic sites. Stonehenge, for instance, displays acoustic properties that suggest it was designed to amplify and focus sound waves. The Great Pyramid of Giza contains chambers that resonate at specific frequencies. Ancient temples around the world show evidence of sophisticated acoustic design principles. If the pre-flood civilizations possessed acoustic communication technology, it would explain how they maintained coordination across a global empire without the electronic communication systems we rely on today. Sound waves travel efficiently through both water and solid rock. With the right understanding of wave mechanics, they could have created a communication network that spanned continents. But this raises an even more disturbing question. If these civilizations possessed such advanced technologies, why did they allow themselves to be destroyed by rising sea levels? Why didn't they simply relocate to higher ground and preserve their technological knowledge? The answer might lie in the scale of the catastrophe they faced. The geological evidence suggests that the end of the last ice age wasn't just a period of gradual sea level rise. It was marked by multiple catastrophic events that occurred in rapid succession. Massive volcanic eruptions, cosmic impacts, sudden climate shifts, and catastrophic flooding events that could devastate entire continents within decades. Recent research into the Younger Dryas period has revealed evidence of what scientists call a cosmic winter, triggered by multiple impact events. Fragments of a disintegrating comet or asteroid struck various locations around the globe, triggering massive wildfires, atmospheric cooling, and the sudden collapse of ice sheets that had been stable for thousands of years. Dr. James Powell, a geologist studying impact evidence from the Younger Dryas period, believes these cosmic events were far more devastating than previously understood. We're not talking about a single impact, Dr. Powell explains. The evidence suggests multiple strikes over a period of several centuries. Each impact would have triggered secondary catastrophes, massive tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, climate disruption. Even an advanced civilization would have struggled to survive such a sustained bombardment. The cosmic impact hypothesis explains many of the puzzling aspects of the underwater archaeological record. Why so many sites show evidence of sudden abandonment? Why valuable artifacts were systematically removed before the sites were submerged? Why the civilization seemed to have possessed advanced knowledge of astronomical cycles and catastrophic events? They knew what was coming because they had experienced similar cosmic catastrophes before. The astronomical knowledge encoded in their monuments wasn't just scientific achievement, it was a warning system, a way of tracking cosmic cycles and predicting when the next bombardment might occur. This interpretation is supported by ancient texts from around the world that describe cyclic catastrophes triggered by celestial events. The Hindu concept of cosmic cycles describes periodic destructions caused by cosmic forces. Mayan astronomy was obsessed with tracking cycles that could predict catastrophic events. Even biblical texts contain references to signs in the heavens that would herald the end of ages. For too long, scholars have dismissed these as primitive religious concepts. But what if they're actually scientific documents, records of cosmic cycles observed and documented by civilizations that possessed advanced astronomical knowledge? The implications are staggering. If cosmic catastrophes follow predictable cycles, if advanced civilizations have been destroyed by these events before, then our own technological society might be facing the same fate. The astronomical knowledge of the pre-flood civilizations might be trying to warn us about cosmic dangers that we haven't even recognized yet, and there's evidence that some researchers are taking this possibility seriously. NASA's Near-Earth Object Program is constantly scanning the skies for potentially hazardous asteroids and comets. The European Space Agency has similar programs designed to detect cosmic threats. But these efforts are focused on single large objects, not the kind of fragmented comet streams that might have caused the Younger Dryas catastrophe. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an astronomer working with the Catalina Sky Survey, believes we need to expand our cosmic threat detection capabilities based on what we're learning about past impact events. The Younger Dryas evidence suggests we're looking for the wrong kind of threat, Dr. Mitchell explains. Instead of single large asteroids, we should be worried about streams of smaller fragments that could bombard Earth over extended periods. Our current detection systems aren't designed to identify this kind of distributed threat. But while modern science is slowly beginning to recognize cosmic threats, the pre-flood civilizations seem to have possessed this knowledge thousands of years ago. The astronomical alignments in their underwater monuments track not just stellar positions, but also the orbits of comets and asteroids that could pose threats to Earth. The Antikythera mechanism, a Greek device that's often called the world's first computer, displays similar capabilities. It could predict not just planetary positions and eclipses, but also the returns of comets and other celestial events. But the Antikythera mechanism dates to only about 2,000 years ago. The underwater monuments suggest that similar computational capabilities existed over 10,000 years ago. This raises the possibility that the Antikythera mechanism wasn't a Greek invention at all, but rather a reconstruction of much older technology. Greek texts refer to ancient wisdom preserved from earlier civilizations. Egyptian records describe knowledge inherited from the first time of the gods. Hindu texts speak of sciences preserved from previous cosmic cycles. What if these references aren't mythological but historical? What if the advanced civilizations of classical antiquity were actually attempting to reconstruct technologies and knowledge systems that had been lost when the pre-flood world was destroyed? This interpretation would explain many of the puzzling aspects of ancient technology. Why certain capabilities appear suddenly in the historical record without clear developmental precursors. Why some ancient structures display engineering sophistication that seems out of place for their supposed time periods. Why ancient texts contain scientific knowledge that supposedly wasn't developed until much later. The classical civilizations weren't starting from scratch. They were rebuilding, attempting to recover knowledge and technologies that had been lost when rising seas destroyed the coastal cities where most of the pre-flood population lived. But the reconstruction was incomplete. Much of the advanced knowledge was lost forever when the libraries and universities of the pre-flood world disappeared beneath the waves. The classical civilizations had to work with fragments, partial records, and oral traditions that preserved only pieces of the original knowledge systems. This explains why ancient astronomy was so sophisticated in some areas, but limited in others. Why ancient metallurgy could produce some remarkable alloys but struggled with other materials. Why ancient engineering could create massive monuments but couldn't reproduce some of the more sophisticated technologies of the pre-flood period. The evidence for this technological regression can be found throughout the ancient world. Egyptian pyramid building reached its peak early in the dynastic period, then gradually declined as the knowledge was lost. Greek science made remarkable advances, then stagnated as the connections to older knowledge sources were severed. Roman engineering was impressive, but never achieved the sophistication displayed in some pre-Roman structures. Each civilization managed to recover some aspects of the pre-flood knowledge, but none succeeded in reconstructing the complete technological system. The knowledge became increasingly fragmented as it was passed down through generations, with each transmission losing crucial details. This fragmentation process continues today. Much of the knowledge that classical civilizations managed to preserve was lost during the Dark Ages. The Library of Alexandria, which contained records from the entire ancient world, was destroyed. Mayan codices were burned by Spanish conquistadors. Entire knowledge traditions disappeared when their practitioners were killed or displaced. But the underwater ruins preserve knowledge from before this fragmentation began. They contain complete technological systems, not just fragments and reconstructions. The astronomical computers, the hydraulic mechanisms, the acoustic communication systems all represent mature technologies that were fully developed and operational. If we could decode these underwater libraries, we might be able to recover knowledge that's been lost for thousands of years. Technologies that could revolutionize our understanding of engineering, astronomy, and communication. Scientific principles that could help us solve problems we're currently struggling with. But we're running out of time to access this knowledge. The underwater sites are deteriorating due to natural processes and human activity. Coral growth is covering inscriptions and mechanisms. Tidal action is eroding stone surfaces. Pollution is accelerating chemical breakdown of artifacts. Meanwhile, the academic establishment continues to resist funding for comprehensive studies of these sites. Research proposals that challenge orthodox historical timelines are routinely rejected. Scientists who publish findings that suggest advanced pre-flood civilizations find their careers threatened. The suppression is systematic and deliberate. Museums refuse to display artifacts that don't fit established narratives. Publishers reject books that challenge mainstream archaeological theories. Media outlets ignore discoveries that might force uncomfortable revisions to accepted history. But the evidence won't stay hidden forever. Independent researchers are making breakthrough discoveries. Crowd-funded expeditions are mapping new sites. Citizen scientists are analyzing data and sharing findings through online networks that bypass traditional academic gatekeepers. The democratization of research technology is breaking down the barriers that have kept this knowledge suppressed. High-resolution sonar equipment is becoming affordable for private researchers. Underwater cameras can document sites in incredible detail. Computer analysis can decode patterns and alignments that human observers might miss. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of the pre-flood world. And the picture that's emerging is of a global civilization that was far more advanced than anything described in our history books. They possessed technologies we're only now rediscovering. They understood cosmic cycles that we're just beginning to recognize. They built communication networks that span the globe using principles we're still trying to understand. But they also left us warnings encoded in monuments designed to survive the catastrophe that destroyed their world. The astronomical alignments, the mathematical constants, the engineering principles, all point to knowledge about cosmic cycles and catastrophic events that could be crucial to our own survival. The question is whether we'll decode these warnings in time, because if the pre-flood civilizations were correct about cosmic cycles, if catastrophic events do follow predictable patterns, then our own advanced civilization might be approaching a similar fate. The cosmic cycles are turning. The astronomical alignments are shifting. And somewhere beneath the waves, the ruins of our ancestors' cities are calling out to us, trying to share their knowledge before it's too late. We have the technology to listen. We have the capability to decode their messages. But we need the courage to challenge the comfortable assumptions that have kept this knowledge hidden for so long. Because the truth about our past might be the key to our future. And that truth is waiting for us in the depths, preserved in stone and metal by a civilization that understood something we've forgotten. That knowledge is the only thing that can survive when worlds end and new ones begin. The pattern becomes even more disturbing when you examine the institutional response to these discoveries. Because it's not just individual researchers being silenced. Entire fields of study are being systematically defunded and marginalized whenever they produce evidence that challenges the established timeline of human civilization. Take marine archaeology, for instance. Despite the fact that over 70% of Earth's surface is covered by water, and despite mounting evidence that the most significant archaeological sites might be underwater, funding for marine archaeological research has actually decreased over the past 2 decades. Universities are closing their underwater archaeology programs. Government agencies are cutting budgets for oceanic exploration. Private foundations that once supported marine research are redirecting their funding to safer, more conventional projects. Dr. Amanda Foster, who ran the University of Miami's underwater archaeology program before it was shut down in 2019, witnessed this systematic defunding firsthand. "We were making breakthrough discoveries every year," she explains, mapping sites that could revolutionize our understanding of human history. Then suddenly the funding dried up. Grant applications were rejected without explanation. Research proposals were buried in bureaucratic red tape. It was as if someone had decided that certain types of discoveries were too dangerous to pursue. The timing of these funding cuts is particularly suspicious. They began accelerating in the early 2000s, just as underwater exploration technology was becoming sophisticated enough to conduct detailed studies of submerged sites. Right when we developed the capability to thoroughly investigate these underwater ruins, the institutional support for doing so mysteriously evaporated. Meanwhile, funding for conventional land-based archaeology continues to flow freely, as long as the research supports orthodox historical narratives. Dig sites in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean receive millions in research grants every year. But propose to study a submerged structure that might predate these civilizations, and suddenly there's no money available. The message is clear. Stick to the approved story, and your career will flourish. Challenge the established timeline, and you'll find yourself marginalized, defunded, and professionally destroyed. But the suppression goes beyond just cutting funding. There's active interference with research that threatens to expose the truth about pre-flood civilizations. Researchers report mysterious equipment failures during crucial investigations. Data gets corrupted or disappears from computer systems. Physical samples are lost or contaminated while in transit to laboratories. Dr. Robert Chen discovered this interference firsthand when he attempted to conduct carbon dating analysis on organic materials recovered from the Cuban underwater site. "We collected pristine samples under controlled conditions," he recalls, but when they arrived at the laboratory they had been contaminated with modern materials that made accurate dating impossible. This happened 3 times with 3 different laboratories. That's not coincidence, that's sabotage. Similar incidents have been reported by researchers working at underwater sites around the world. Equipment malfunctions that occur only during crucial phases of investigation. Computer viruses that target specific research databases. Even physical intimidation of researchers who get too close to sensitive discoveries. The pattern suggests a coordinated effort to prevent the truth about pre-flood civilizations from reaching the public. But who would have the resources and motivation to conduct such a systematic suppression campaign? And why would they consider this knowledge so dangerous that it must be hidden at all costs? The answer might lie in the implications of what these discoveries represent. Because if advanced civilizations existed before the current historical timeline, if they possessed technologies we're only now rediscovering, then virtually every major institution in our society has been built on false assumptions about human development and potential. Educational systems would need to be completely restructured. Textbooks would need to be rewritten from scratch. Museums would need to redesign their exhibits to reflect a radically different understanding of human history. Religious institutions would need to reconcile their creation narratives with evidence of much older advanced civilizations. The economic implications are equally staggering. Entire industries have been built around the assumption that we represent the pinnacle of human technological achievement, If it turns out that ancient civilizations possess technologies we haven't mastered yet, then patents, copyrights, and proprietary technologies that form the basis of modern wealth could become worthless overnight. Consider the energy industry, for instance. What if the pre-flood civilizations possessed clean, renewable energy sources that we haven't discovered yet? What if their acoustic technologies could provide more efficient communication systems than our current electronic infrastructure? What if their engineering principles could revolutionize construction and manufacturing? The existing power structures that control these industries have every incentive to prevent such technologies from being rediscovered. The revelation that ancient civilizations might have solved problems we're still struggling with would undermine the authority of modern scientific institutions and threaten the profits of established technological monopolies. But the suppression might go even deeper than economic interests. Because the evidence from underwater sites suggests that the pre-flood civilizations possessed not just advanced technologies, but also advanced knowledge about cosmic cycles and catastrophic events that could threaten our current civilization. If these ancient astronomical computers were correct about cosmic threats, if their warnings about cyclical catastrophes are accurate, then our current civilization might be living on borrowed time. The same cosmic forces that destroyed the pre-flood world could strike again, and we might not be prepared for what's coming. This knowledge could cause mass panic if it became widely known. Stock markets could collapse if investors realized that our entire technological infrastructure might be vulnerable to cosmic catastrophes. Social order could break down if people understood that advanced civilizations have been destroyed before and could be destroyed again. From this perspective, the suppression of underwater archaeological evidence isn't just about protecting established academic theories or economic interests. It's about maintaining social stability by preventing people from learning truths that could undermine their faith in the permanence and security of modern civilization. But this protective censorship comes at a terrible cost. Because if the pre-flood civilizations really did possess advanced knowledge about cosmic threats, then by suppressing their warnings, we might be ensuring our own destruction. The knowledge that could help us prepare for or prevent catastrophic events is being deliberately hidden from the people who need it most. The irony is profound. In trying to protect civilization from destabilizing knowledge, the suppressors might be guaranteeing that civilization will be destroyed by its own ignorance. The same pattern that led to the fall of the pre-flood world could be repeating itself today, with institutional arrogance and willful blindness setting the stage for another catastrophic collapse. And the evidence suggests we might not have much time left. Recent astronomical observations have detected increasing activity in the same cosmic regions that ancient texts identify as sources of catastrophic events. Solar activity is intensifying in patterns that match descriptions from pre-flood astronomical records. Magnetic field fluctuations are occurring that correspond to conditions described in ancient warning systems. Dr. Lisa Park, an astrophysicist who has studied correlations between ancient astronomical data and modern observations, believes we're entering a period of increased cosmic instability that could trigger events similar to those that destroyed the pre-flood civilizations. The patterns are unmistakable, Dr. Park explains. Ancient astronomical records describe cosmic conditions that are remarkably similar to what we're observing today. If their predictions are accurate, we could be approaching a period of catastrophic cosmic events within the next few decades. But Dr. Park's research has been systematically suppressed by the astronomical community. Her papers have been rejected by major journals, her funding has been cut, her colleagues have been pressured to distance themselves from her work. The same institutional suppression that affects underwater archaeology is being applied to any research that suggests ancient civilizations might have possessed advanced astronomical knowledge. The message is consistent across all fields of study. Don't investigate evidence that suggests our ancestors were more advanced than we've been taught. Don't pursue research that might reveal cosmic threats we're not prepared to handle. Don't publish findings that could destabilize established social and economic structures. But the evidence won't disappear just because it's being suppressed. The underwater ruins continue to exist. The astronomical alignments continue to point to cosmic cycles and catastrophic events. The warnings encoded in ancient monuments continue to count down toward whatever cosmic disaster the pre-flood civilizations were trying to help us avoid. Independent researchers working outside the traditional academic system are beginning to decode these warnings. Crowd-funded expeditions are mapping underwater sites that official archaeology refuses to investigate. Citizen scientists are analyzing astronomical data that institutional astronomers ignore. Online communities are sharing discoveries and connecting patterns that establishment researchers pretend don't exist. The democratization of research technology is making it increasingly difficult to suppress inconvenient evidence. High-resolution satellite imagery allows anyone to detect anomalous structures on ocean floors. Affordable sonar equipment enables private researchers to map underwater sites in detail. Computer analysis tools can identify patterns and alignments that reveal the true sophistication of ancient civilizations. Each breakthrough by independent researchers makes the official suppression more obvious and more desperate. Government agencies are implementing new restrictions on oceanic exploration. Academic institutions are tightening control over research publications. Technology companies are developing new censorship algorithms to suppress information about pre-flood civilizations. But the truth has a way of emerging despite all efforts to contain it, because the evidence is too widespread, too consistent, and too significant to remain hidden forever. The underwater ruins span every ocean. The astronomical alignments appear at sites around the globe. The technological sophistication is too advanced to dismiss as coincidence or misinterpretation. We're approaching a tipping point where the suppression itself becomes the story, where the efforts to hide the truth about pre-flood civilizations become so obvious and so desperate that they actually draw more attention to the evidence they're trying to suppress. The question is whether we'll reach that tipping point in time to decode the warnings that our ancestors left for us. Because if the cosmic cycles they tracked are accurate, if the catastrophic events they predicted follow the timelines they calculated, then we might have very little time left to prepare for what's coming. The pre-flood civilizations face the same choice we're facing now. They could acknowledge the cosmic threats they detected and work together to prepare for catastrophic events. Or they could ignore the warnings, suppress inconvenient evidence, and hope that denial would somehow protect them from cosmic forces beyond their control. We know which choice they made. We can see the results in the underwater ruins that mark the locations of their drowned cities. The question is whether we'll learn from their example, or whether our own cities will join theirs beneath the waves when the next cosmic catastrophe strikes. The clock is ticking, the cosmic cycles are turning, and somewhere in the depths the ruins of our predecessors are calling out to us, trying to share the knowledge that could save us from repeating their fate. But we have to be willing to listen. We have to be brave enough to challenge the institutions that profit from our ignorance, and we have to act quickly, before the same forces that destroyed the pre-flood world complete another cycle of cosmic destruction. Because the evidence suggests that we're not just studying ancient history. We're looking at a preview of our own future, encoded in stone and preserved beneath the waves by a civilization that understood something we've forgotten. That knowledge is the only defense against the cosmic forces that periodically reset human civilization back to zero. The truth is down there, waiting for us to find it. The warnings are clear for anyone brave enough to decode them. The question is whether we'll have the wisdom to listen before it's too late, or whether we'll join the ranks of the lost civilizations whose ruins now serve as monuments to the consequences of ignoring cosmic realities that are larger and more powerful than human pride. The choice is ours, but we need to make it soon, because the cosmic countdown that began 12,000 years ago is approaching zero, and this time there might not be any survivors left to rebuild from the ruins we leave behind. What makes this suppression even more chilling is the systematic way evidence gets buried when it threatens the wrong people. Take what happened in 2018 when a team of marine archaeologists working off the coast of Morocco made a discovery that should have revolutionized our understanding of ancient navigation. They found what appeared to be an ancient harbour complex, complete with sophisticated docking facilities and what looked like lighthouse foundations, all sitting under 300 feet of water. Dr. Sarah Mendez, who led the expedition, described structures that displayed engineering principles supposedly not developed until the Roman period. Yet based on sea level data, these installations would have been built over 8,000 years ago. The precision of the harbour design, the mathematical ratios used in the lighthouse construction, even the materials used in the breakwaters, all suggested a level of maritime engineering that shouldn't have existed in the Neolithic period. The discovery made headlines for exactly 3 days. Then something strange happened. The Moroccan government suddenly revoked the research permits. The international team was ordered to cease all operations immediately. The sonar data was confiscated by authorities. And Dr. Mendez found herself facing charges of conducting unauthorized archaeological work, despite having obtained all proper permits through official channels. It was surreal, Dr. Mendez recalls. One day we're being celebrated for making the discovery of the century. The next day we're being treated like criminals. Someone made a phone call and suddenly our groundbreaking research became a threat to national security. The Moroccan site isn't an isolated incident. Similar patterns of discovery and suppression have occurred at underwater locations around the world. Researchers make extraordinary finds that challenge orthodox timelines. Initial reports generate excitement in the scientific community. Then institutional forces mobilize to shut down the research, confiscate the evidence, and discredit the researchers involved. In 2015, a joint American-Turkish expedition detected what appeared to be a massive stepped pyramid structure beneath the Sea of Marmara. The formation was enormous, potentially larger than any pyramid ever built on land. Preliminary sonar mapping suggested internal chambers and passages that would require sophisticated engineering to construct. The discovery was announced at a major archaeological conference and generated intense international interest. National Geographic was preparing a documentary. The Turkish government was planning to establish a new marine archaeological preserve. Research institutions were competing for the opportunity to participate in the excavation. Then everything stopped. The Turkish authorities classified the site as a military zone. Foreign researchers were banned from the area. The sonar data was declared state secrets, and the lead researcher, Dr. James Morrison from the University of Pennsylvania, had his passport confiscated when he tried to return to Turkey to continue the investigation. They didn't just shut down our research, Dr. Morrison explains. They made it clear that pursuing this discovery any further would end my career and possibly worse. The message was unmistakable. Some truths are too dangerous to reveal. But why would ancient underwater structures pose such a threat to modern governments? The answer might lie in the implications of what these discoveries represent for current geopolitical power structures. Because if advanced civilizations existed thousands of years before the accepted timeline, if they possess technologies and knowledge systems that we haven't rediscovered yet, then the entire basis of modern technological superiority becomes questionable. Consider the implications for patent law and intellectual property rights. Corporations have invested trillions of dollars in developing technologies that they claim as proprietary innovations. But what if many of these modern technologies are actually rediscoveries of ancient knowledge? What if the principles behind our most advanced systems were already understood and implemented by civilizations that existed before recorded history? The legal ramifications would be staggering. Patents could be invalidated if prior art existed in ancient technologies. Corporate monopolies could collapse if their proprietary knowledge turned out to be reconstructions of public domain ancient wisdom. Entire industries built on the assumption of technological novelty could face existential threats if ancient precedents were discovered. But the implications go far beyond economics. The revelation that advanced civilizations existed before our current historical timeline would fundamentally challenge the narratives that modern nation-states use to justify their authority and territorial claims. Egypt's entire national identity is built around being the cradle of civilization, home to humanity's first great monuments and technological achievements. If underwater ruins in the Mediterranean predate the pyramids by thousands of years, if more advanced civilizations existed before pharaonic Egypt, then the foundation of Egyptian cultural supremacy crumbles. The same applies to every nation that claims historical precedents as justification for territorial control or cultural authority. Greece's claim to being the birthplace of democracy and philosophy becomes questionable if earlier advanced civilizations possess sophisticated political and intellectual systems. China's narrative of continuous civilization loses its uniqueness if similar continuity existed in other regions that are now underwater. Even more threatening to established power structures is what these discoveries might reveal about the cyclical nature of human civilization. Because if advanced societies have risen and fallen multiple times throughout history, if our current technological civilization is just the latest in a series of cycles, then the assumption of inevitable progress that underpins modern political and economic systems becomes fundamentally flawed. The capitalist system depends on the belief that growth and development are linear and perpetual. Stock markets price future earnings based on assumptions of continuous technological advancement. Investment strategies assume that human knowledge and capability will keep expanding indefinitely. But if history is actually cyclical, if advanced civilizations regularly collapse and are forced to rebuild from scratch, then these economic models are built on false premises. Dr. Michael Chen, an economist who has studied the implications of cyclical civilization theory, believes this could explain the systematic suppression of evidence for pre-flood advanced societies. The entire global financial system is predicated on the assumption that human progress is linear and permanent, Dr. Chen explains. If people understood that advanced civilizations have collapsed before, that technological progress can be lost and forgotten, it would undermine confidence in long-term investments and economic planning. The psychological impact alone could trigger a global financial crisis. But there's an even darker possibility. What if the suppression isn't just about protecting current power structures? What if certain groups possess knowledge about cosmic cycles and catastrophic events that they're deliberately keeping secret while they prepare for the next collapse? The evidence suggests that some organizations have been quietly studying the astronomical data encoded in ancient monuments, while publicly dismissing these sites as primitive religious structures. Government agencies with classified budgets have been conducting underwater surveys while denying that significant archaeological sites exist beneath the waves. Private research foundations have been mapping cosmic threat scenarios, while funding public relations campaigns that ridicule anyone who suggests ancient civilizations possessed advanced astronomical knowledge. This creates a terrifying possibility that a small group of elites possesses knowledge about impending cosmic catastrophes while deliberately keeping the general population ignorant and unprepared. They could be using their advanced knowledge to position themselves to survive the next cyclical collapse, while ensuring that everyone else remains vulnerable. The pattern of suppression supports this interpretation. Research that could help the general public understand cosmic threats gets defunded and discredited. Technologies that ancient civilizations used to predict and prepare for catastrophic events remain classified or are dismissed as impossible. Knowledge that could help humanity as a whole survive cyclical disasters is treated as state secrets or proprietary information. Meanwhile, certain government agencies and private organizations continue to make massive investments in underground facilities, space-based observation systems, and other technologies that would be useful for surviving global catastrophes. The same groups that suppress public research into ancient cosmic warning systems are simultaneously developing their own cosmic threat detection and survival capabilities. Dr. Patricia Wells, a former NASA researcher who worked on classified asteroid detection programs, witnessed this double standard firsthand before she was forced to resign for asking uncomfortable questions about the agency's priorities. "We were spending billions on detecting potential cosmic threats," Dr. Wells reveals. "But when I suggested that we should study ancient astronomical data that might help us understand long-term cosmic cycles, I was told that was outside our mandate. They wanted to detect immediate threats they could control, but they didn't want to investigate evidence that might reveal threats too large for any single government to handle." This selective approach to cosmic threat research suggests that certain groups are more interested in maintaining their own survival advantages than in protecting humanity as a whole. They want enough warning to save themselves and their chosen associates, but they don't want the general population to have access to the same information. The ancient astronomical computers found at underwater sites represent exactly the kind of long-term cosmic cycle data that could benefit all of humanity. But instead of funding comprehensive studies of these devices, government agencies classify them as archaeological curiosities, while secretly analysing their computational capabilities for proprietary advantage. The same pattern appears in every field related to ancient advanced knowledge. Acoustic technologies that could revolutionise communication are studied in classified military programs, while public research into ancient acoustic systems gets defunded. Engineering principles that could improve construction safety are proprietary information for defense contractors, while archaeological evidence of advanced ancient engineering is dismissed as impossible. Energy technologies that ancient civilizations might have used remain locked away in black-budget research programs, while public scientists are told that investigating such possibilities is pseudo-scientific speculation. The knowledge exists, but it's being hoarded by groups that want to maintain their technological advantages over the general population. This creates a feedback loop of ignorance and vulnerability. The more knowledge gets suppressed and classified, the less prepared ordinary people become for the cosmic threats that ancient civilizations understood and tried to warn us about. The more the general population is kept ignorant of cyclical catastrophe patterns, the more dependent they become on elite groups that claim to possess exclusive knowledge about cosmic dangers. But there's a fundamental flaw in this strategy. Because if the ancient astronomical data is accurate, if cosmic catastrophes follow predictable cycles that affect the entire planet, then no amount of private preparation will be sufficient to preserve civilization through the next collapse. The scale of the forces involved is too large for any single group to survive independently. The pre-flood civilizations understood this. The evidence suggests they tried to preserve knowledge for the benefit of future humanity as a whole, not just for elite survivors. The astronomical computers, the engineering manuals encoded in stone, the warning systems built into monuments all appear designed to help entire civilizations prepare for and survive cosmic catastrophes. But our current elite groups seem to have learned the wrong lesson from the pre-flood collapse. Instead of working to prepare all of humanity for cosmic threats, they're focusing on ensuring their own survival, while keeping everyone else ignorant and vulnerable. This strategy virtually guarantees that human civilization will collapse again, because the knowledge and cooperation needed to survive planetary-scale catastrophes requires the participation of the entire species, not just a small group of elites. The underwater ruins serve as a stark reminder of what happens when advanced civilizations fail to adequately prepare for cosmic threats. But they also preserve the knowledge that could help us avoid repeating their mistakes, if we're brave enough to decode their warnings and wise enough to share that knowledge with everyone who might need it. The question is whether we'll overcome the institutional forces that profit from ignorance and suppression, whether we'll demand access to the classified research that could help us understand cosmic threats, whether we'll insist on public funding for the underwater archaeological projects that could recover ancient survival knowledge. Because the cosmic cycles don't care about human politics or economic systems. The astronomical forces that destroyed the pre-flood civilizations operate on timescales that dwarf human institutions, and if we don't start taking these threats seriously, if we don't begin preparing as a species rather than as competing factions, then our own advanced civilization will join the ranks of the lost cities beneath the waves. The evidence is overwhelming. The warnings are clear. The technology exists to decode the messages our ancestors left for us. But we need to act quickly, because the cosmic countdown that began 12,000 years ago is approaching its conclusion, and this time there might not be any survivors left to preserve the knowledge for the next cycle of human civilization. The ruins beneath the waves are calling out to us, trying to share the wisdom that could save us from repeating their fate. But we have to be willing to listen, even if the truth they reveal challenges everything we've been taught about our past and everything we believe about our future. Time is running out, the cycles are turning, and somewhere in the depths our ancestors' final warning is waiting for us to find the courage to decode it before it's too late. The most terrifying aspect of this suppression becomes clear when you examine what's happening to researchers who get too close to the truth. Because it's not just funding cuts and career destruction anymore, people are disappearing. Dr. Alexandra Petrov was a marine geologist from Moscow State University who specialized in underwater formation analysis. In 2017, she published a paper suggesting that certain geometric patterns on the Baltic seafloor showed clear evidence of artificial construction. The formations displayed mathematical precision that natural processes couldn't explain, tool marks that indicated sophisticated cutting techniques, alignments that corresponded to stellar positions from thousands of years ago. Her research gained international attention. Universities invited her to speak. Documentary filmmakers wanted to interview her. Archaeological journals were requesting follow-up studies. Then, in March 2018, Dr. Petrov boarded a research vessel in the Baltic Sea to conduct additional surveys of the formations she'd identified. The ship returned to port 3 days later. Dr. Petrov wasn't on board. The official explanation was a tragic accident. Rough seas, equipment failure, a scientist lost overboard during night operations. But her research team tells a different story. They describe strange vessels that appeared on their sonar, unmarked helicopters that circled their research ship, and Dr. Petrov's growing paranoia in the days before her disappearance, her conviction that someone was monitoring her communications and following her movements. She knew she was in danger, recalls Dr. Ivan Kozlov, who worked with Petrov on the Baltic Sea project. The last time I spoke with her, she said she'd discovered something that certain people didn't want revealed. She was planning to publish her findings regardless of the consequences. 2 days later, she was gone. Dr. Petrov's research files disappeared along with her. Her computer hard drives were wiped clean. Her backup data storage devices vanished from her university office. Even her personal notes and sketches were removed from her apartment, while her family was attending her memorial service. The message was unmistakable. Investigate certain underwater sites, and you might not survive to publish your findings. But Dr. Petrov wasn't the first researcher to vanish under suspicious circumstances. Dr. James Hartwell, a British marine archaeologist, disappeared in 2014 while investigating underwater structures off the coast of Scotland. Dr. Maria Santos, who we heard from earlier, survived an apparent assassination attempt in 2019 when her car's brakes mysteriously failed on a mountain road near Barcelona. Dr. Chen Wei, a Chinese oceanographer who mapped anomalous structures in the South China Sea, died in what authorities called a gas leak explosion at his Beijing apartment. But colleagues noted that Dr. Chen had been using electric heating for years and had no gas appliances in his home. The pattern is consistent across multiple countries and research institutions. Scientists who make discoveries that threaten the official narrative about human history face escalating pressure to abandon their research. First comes the academic pressure, rejection of papers, loss of funding, professional isolation. Then comes the personal pressure, surveillance, threats, mysterious accidents. And if they persist in trying to reveal what they've discovered, they simply vanish. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, an independent researcher who's been documenting these disappearances, has identified over 30 marine archaeologists and underwater researchers who have died under suspicious circumstances or vanished entirely over the past 2 decades. The statistical probability of so many specialists in such a narrow field dying in accidents or disappearing is virtually zero, Dr. Martinez explains. We're looking at a systematic elimination of researchers who pose a threat to someone's version of history. But who has the resources and motivation to conduct such a global elimination campaign? The answer might lie in the scope of what these underwater discoveries actually represent. Because the more we study these submerged sites, the more it becomes clear that we're not just looking at isolated ruins from ancient civilizations. We're looking at evidence of a global catastrophe that could happen again. The astronomical data encoded in these underwater monuments doesn't just track historical cosmic events, it predicts future ones. The mathematical constants built into their architecture don't just demonstrate ancient knowledge, they provide calculations that could help us prepare for what's coming next. But this knowledge is dangerous to more than just academic theories and economic systems. It's dangerous to the very survival of current power structures because it reveals that human civilization is fundamentally unstable, that advanced societies have collapsed before, and that the forces responsible for those collapses operate on cosmic scales that no human institution can control. If the general population understood that advanced civilizations have been destroyed by cosmic events before, if they realized that our current technological society is just as vulnerable to these forces as previous ones were, if they comprehended that the same astronomical cycles that destroyed the pre-flood world are approaching completion again, it would fundamentally change how people think about government, economics, and social organization. Why pay taxes to support long-term government programs if civilization might collapse within decades? Why invest in retirement accounts if the financial system might not survive the next cosmic catastrophe? Why follow laws and social conventions if the institutions that enforce them could be swept away by forces beyond human control? The revelation that human civilization is cyclical rather than progressive would undermine every assumption that modern society is built upon. It would trigger a fundamental re-evaluation of priorities that could destabilize every existing power structure on Earth. From this perspective, the elimination of researchers who uncover evidence of cyclical civilization becomes a matter of institutional survival. The groups that benefit from current social and economic arrangements have every incentive to prevent knowledge that could trigger mass questioning of those arrangements. But there's an even darker possibility. What if the elimination campaign isn't just about preventing destabilizing knowledge from reaching the public? What if it's about ensuring that when the next cosmic catastrophe occurs, only certain groups possess the knowledge needed to survive and rebuild? The ancient astronomical computers found at underwater sites don't just track cosmic cycles. They provide detailed information about when catastrophic events are likely to occur, what forms they might take, and how civilizations can prepare for them. This knowledge could be the difference between survival and extinction when the next cosmic catastrophe strikes. If certain groups possess this knowledge while everyone else remains ignorant, they would have an enormous advantage in surviving the collapse of current civilization and controlling whatever emerges afterward. They could position themselves in safe locations, stockpile necessary resources, and develop technologies needed for post-catastrophe survival, all while ensuring that potential competitors remain unprepared and vulnerable. The systematic elimination of researchers who might decode these ancient warning systems serves this strategy perfectly. By preventing the knowledge from becoming public, they ensure that only they possess the information needed to survive what's coming. Dr. Sarah Kim, a former NSA analyst who worked on classified threat assessment programs before becoming a whistleblower, believes this interpretation explains the coordinated nature of the suppression campaign. The level of coordination required to eliminate researchers across multiple countries and institutions suggests government involvement at the highest levels, Dr. Kim explains. But it's not just about national security. It's about ensuring that when civilization collapses, the right people are in position to control what comes next. This strategy has historical precedents. Throughout history, elite groups have used their advanced knowledge of disasters to position themselves advantageously while leaving everyone else unprepared. They've profited from wars they helped instigate, economic collapses they saw coming, and social upheavals they could have prevented. But the scale of what's approaching dwarfs any previous catastrophe. If the ancient astronomical data is accurate, if the cosmic cycles tracked by pre-flood civilizations are approaching completion, then we're facing potential destruction that could eliminate most of human civilization while leaving only scattered survivors to rebuild from scratch. The groups that are eliminating researchers and suppressing evidence seem to understand this. They're not just trying to maintain their current power, they're positioning themselves to become the founders of whatever civilization emerges after the collapse. But their strategy contains a fatal flaw. Because the cosmic forces that destroyed previous advanced civilizations operate on scales that no human preparation can fully address. The asteroid impacts, the volcanic eruptions, the climate disruptions, the magnetic field reversals that mark the end of cosmic cycles affect the entire planet. No underground bunker, no mountain fortress, no isolated island can provide complete protection from planetary-scale catastrophes. The pre-flood civilizations understood this. That's why they tried to preserve knowledge for the benefit of future humanity as a whole, rather than for the exclusive advantage of elite survivors. They encoded their warnings in monuments designed to survive cosmic catastrophes. They built their astronomical computers to help entire civilizations prepare for cyclical disasters. They left their knowledge where future humans could find it, not locked away in secret archives. But our current elite groups have learned the wrong lesson from the pre-flood collapse. Instead of working to prepare all of humanity for cosmic threats, they're ensuring that most people remain ignorant and vulnerable while they hoard survival knowledge for themselves. This strategy guarantees that human civilization will collapse again, because the knowledge and cooperation needed to survive planetary-scale catastrophes requires the participation of entire populations, not just small groups of elites. The pre-flood civilizations fell despite their advanced technology and astronomical knowledge. What makes current elite groups think they can succeed where entire advanced civilizations failed? The answer is hubris. The same arrogance that leads them to suppress evidence and eliminate researchers also blinds them to the limitations of their own survival strategies. They believe they can control forces that operate on cosmic scales. They think they can preserve their power through catastrophes that have destroyed every previous advanced civilization. But the underwater ruins serve as monuments to the failure of this approach. The pre-flood elites who built those cities possessed technologies and knowledge that surpassed our own. They had astronomical computers that could predict cosmic events with precision we haven't achieved. They had engineering capabilities that we're still trying to understand. They had global communication networks that connected civilizations across every continent. And they still failed to prevent the collapse that submerged their cities beneath the waves. The question is whether we'll learn from their example or repeat their mistakes. Whether we'll demand access to the suppressed knowledge that could help all of humanity prepare for cosmic threats. Whether we'll insist on public disclosure of the research that's been classified to maintain elite advantages, because the cosmic cycles don't recognize human authority. The astronomical forces that destroyed the pre-flood world don't respect government classifications or corporate proprietary information. When the next catastrophic event occurs, it will affect everyone equally, regardless of their security clearances or bank account balances. The only rational response is to share the knowledge as widely as possible, to prepare as a species rather than as competing factions, to work together to develop technologies and strategies that might help human civilization survive what's coming. But that requires overcoming the institutional forces that profit from ignorance and division. It means challenging the groups that would rather see civilization collapse than lose their positions of privilege. It means demanding transparency from organizations that have built their power on secrecy and suppression. The researchers who have died or disappeared were trying to provide this transparency. They were working to decode the warnings that our ancestors left for us. They were attempting to share knowledge that could benefit all of humanity. Their elimination serves as a stark reminder of how far certain groups will go to maintain their advantages, but it also demonstrates the importance of what they were trying to accomplish, because if the knowledge they died for wasn't crucial to human survival, why would anyone go to such lengths to suppress it? The answer is obvious. The underwater ruins contain information that could save our civilization from repeating the catastrophic collapse that destroyed the pre-flood world. The astronomical computers could help us predict and prepare for cosmic threats. The engineering principles could help us build structures capable of surviving planetary disasters. But this knowledge is only valuable if it's shared widely enough to be implemented on a civilization-wide scale. Keeping it secret, hoarding it for the advantage of small elite groups, virtually guarantees that it won't be sufficient to prevent the next collapse. The time has come to honor the memory of the researchers who died trying to reveal these truths, to demand accountability from the institutions that ordered their elimination, to insist on full disclosure of the classified research into cosmic threats and ancient warning systems. Because somewhere beneath the waves, the ruins of our ancestors' cities are waiting to share the knowledge that could save us from their fate. But we have to be brave enough to listen, even if the truth they reveal threatens the comfortable lies that our society is built upon. The cosmic countdown is approaching zero. The elimination of researchers has only delayed the inevitable revelation of what's coming. And when the next catastrophic event begins, the groups that suppressed this knowledge will discover that their secrets can't protect them from forces that operate on cosmic scales. The only question is whether enough of the truth will survive their suppression campaign to help humanity prepare for what lies ahead. Whether the warnings encoded in underwater monuments will be decoded in time to make a difference. Whether we'll have the wisdom to unite as a species in the face of cosmic threats that dwarf our petty human conflicts. The researchers who died for this knowledge believed it was possible. They sacrificed their lives in the hope that humanity could learn from the past and prepare for the future. The question is whether we'll prove worthy of their sacrifice, or whether our own cities will join theirs beneath the waves when the cycles complete their ancient pattern of destruction and renewal. The truth is, we're running out of time to decode these messages, and the urgency becomes even more apparent when you examine what's been happening in restricted oceanic zones over the past 5 years. Because while public researchers are being eliminated and independent investigations are being shut down, there's been a massive increase in classified underwater operations conducted by military and intelligence agencies around the world. Satellite imagery analysis reveals a disturbing pattern. Naval vessels from multiple nations have been conducting coordinated operations at the exact locations where the most significant underwater ruins have been detected. These aren't routine naval exercises or scientific surveys. These are systematic extraction operations, using advanced deep-sea mining equipment and specialized archaeological recovery systems. Captain David Thompson, a former US Navy submariner who participated in several of these classified missions before retiring in 2020, describes operations that were unlike anything in his 30-year career. "We weren't just mapping these sites," Captain Thompson reveals. "We were removing specific artifacts under direct orders from agencies that don't officially exist. Stone tablets, metal objects, what looked like technological components that had been underwater for thousands of years. Everything was classified above my clearance level, but it was clear we were racing against time to secure these materials before someone else got to them." The international scope of these operations suggests a level of cooperation between traditionally hostile nations that defies public understanding of geopolitical relationships. Russian, Chinese, American, and European vessels have been observed working in close proximity at underwater sites, sharing data and coordinating recovery efforts despite official tensions between their governments. Dr. Elena Kozlova, a former Russian naval intelligence officer who defected to the West in 2019, provides insight into the true nature of these cooperative efforts. The public sees conflict between superpowers, but at the highest classification levels, there's been secret cooperation for decades regarding what they call legacy threats, Dr. Kozlova explains. The underwater sites represent knowledge that transcends national interests. When you're dealing with information that could determine whether human civilization survives the next cosmic cycle, traditional geopolitical divisions become irrelevant. But this cooperation comes with a dark purpose. Instead of sharing the recovered knowledge with the global scientific community, these agencies are hoarding the artifacts in classified facilities around the world, underground storage complexes that most government employees don't even know exist. The scope of these hidden archives is staggering. Whistleblower reports describe warehouse facilities beneath military installations that contain thousands of artifacts recovered from underwater sites, stone tablets covered with astronomical calculations, metal devices that display technological principles decades ahead of current science, crystalline structures that appear to store information in ways we don't understand. Marcus Chen, a former contractor who worked on cataloguing systems for one of these facilities before his security clearance was revoked, describes repositories that would revolutionize our understanding of human history if their contents were ever made public. The artifacts we processed weren't primitive stone tools or pottery fragments, Chen reveals. These were sophisticated devices with moving parts, precision-engineered components, materials that our laboratories couldn't identify. Some of the tablets contained mathematical formulas that our best scientists couldn't decode. Others had star charts that showed stellar positions from periods when those stars shouldn't have been visible from Earth. The existence of these classified archives raises a crucial question. If governments are spending billions to recover and study ancient technologies in secret, why are they simultaneously funding campaigns to convince the public that such technologies never existed? The answer lies in the nature of what they're discovering. Because the artifacts aren't just evidence of advanced ancient civilizations, they're functional technologies that could revolutionize modern society if properly understood and implemented. Energy systems that don't require fossil fuels, communication devices that operate on principles we haven't discovered, transportation technologies that could make current aerospace systems obsolete, but releasing these technologies would destabilize every existing power structure on Earth. Oil companies would become worthless overnight if clean energy systems based on ancient principles became public knowledge. Telecommunications corporations would face extinction if superior communication technologies were revealed. Military contractors would lose their advantages if ancient defensive systems proved more effective than modern weapons. From this perspective, the suppression of underwater archaeological evidence serves multiple purposes. It prevents destabilizing technologies from reaching the public, while ensuring that only authorized groups can study and potentially reverse engineer these ancient systems for their own advantage. Dr. Patricia Wells, the former NASA researcher we heard from earlier, witnessed this selective technology development firsthand during her time working on classified programs. We had access to materials and principles that could have solved every energy crisis on Earth, Dr. Wells explains. But instead of developing them for public benefit, we were told to focus on military applications. The same ancient technologies that could have provided clean energy for everyone were being weaponized for strategic advantage. This weaponization of ancient knowledge creates a terrifying scenario. If the cosmic catastrophes predicted by pre-flood astronomical systems do occur, the groups that possess these classified technologies would have enormous advantages in surviving and rebuilding. They could use ancient energy systems to power their survival facilities, ancient communication technologies to coordinate their operations, ancient defensive systems to protect themselves from cosmic threats. Meanwhile, the general population would remain dependent on vulnerable modern technologies that would fail during the kind of electromagnetic disruptions that accompany cosmic catastrophes. Power grids would collapse, communication networks would go dark, and transportation systems would become inoperable, leaving billions of people helpless in the face of planetary-scale disasters. The classified recovery operations seem designed to create exactly this scenario. By hoarding ancient survival technologies while keeping the public ignorant of cosmic threats, elite groups are positioning themselves to be the sole survivors of the next catastrophic cycle. But there's evidence that this strategy is already backfiring. Because the cosmic forces that destroyed the pre-flood civilizations aren't just external threats. They include internal instabilities that advanced societies create for themselves through technological hubris and social inequality. Recent analysis of ancient climate data suggests that the pre-flood civilizations didn't just fall victim to cosmic impacts and natural disasters. They also experienced social collapse triggered by their own technological capabilities and the concentration of power in the hands of small elite groups. Dr. Michael Park, a systems theorist who has studied the collapse patterns of complex civilizations, believes our current trajectory mirrors the final phases of pre-flood society. Advanced civilizations become unstable when technological power becomes concentrated in the hands of groups that lose touch with the needs of the general population, Dr. Park explains. The pre-flood societies appear to have faced the same challenge we're facing now: how to manage advanced technologies without creating fatal inequalities that destroy social cohesion. The underwater ruins show evidence of this social breakdown. Later construction phases at many sites display defensive characteristics that weren't present in earlier periods. Walls were built higher, access points were restricted. Residential areas were segregated in ways that suggest growing conflicts between different social classes. Most tellingly, the final construction phases at these sites show evidence of hasty abandonment. Valuable materials were removed, important structures were sealed, and portable technologies were evacuated. But the infrastructure needed to support large populations was left behind. This suggests that when the cosmic catastrophes began, the elite groups who possessed advanced knowledge and technologies abandoned the general population to save themselves. They took their portable assets and retreated to secure locations, leaving millions of people defenseless against the rising waters and cosmic disasters. The same pattern appears to be developing today. While public infrastructure deteriorates and social inequality increases, elite groups are building extensive underground facilities and developing classified technologies that could help them survive planetary catastrophes. But these preparations are designed to benefit only a small fraction of the human population. The recent increase in classified underwater recovery operations suggests that these groups believe the next cosmic catastrophe is approaching rapidly. They're racing to secure as much ancient survival technology as possible before the cycle completes itself. But their exclusive approach to this knowledge virtually guarantees that human civilization will collapse again, because the scale of cosmic catastrophes requires cooperative responses that involve entire populations. The pre-flood civilizations learned this lesson too late. Their advanced technologies and astronomical knowledge weren't sufficient to prevent collapse, because they failed to prepare their entire societies for what was coming. The elite groups who possessed crucial survival knowledge tried to save themselves while abandoning everyone else, and the result was the destruction of their entire civilization. Our current elite groups seem determined to repeat this mistake. They're hoarding ancient technologies while keeping the general population ignorant of cosmic threats. They're building exclusive survival facilities while allowing public infrastructure to deteriorate. They're preparing for their own survival while ensuring that billions of people will be helpless when the next catastrophe strikes. But there's still time to change this trajectory. The classified archives contain knowledge that could help all of humanity prepare for cosmic catastrophes. The ancient technologies being recovered from underwater sites could provide clean energy, advanced communication, and defensive capabilities for entire civilizations, not just elite groups. The astronomical data encoded in these underwater monuments could help us predict and prepare for cosmic events with precision that surpasses our current capabilities. The engineering principles preserved in submerged structures could help us build infrastructure capable of surviving planetary disasters, but accessing this knowledge requires overcoming the institutional forces that profit from secrecy and inequality. It means demanding transparency from agencies that operate in the shadows. It means insisting on public disclosure of research that could benefit all of humanity. The researchers who died trying to reveal these truths understood that time was running short. They sacrificed their lives to decode warnings that could save our civilization from repeating the catastrophic mistakes of the pre-flood world. Their work represents our best hope for breaking the cycle of elite hoarding and civilizational collapse that has plagued human societies for millennia. But their sacrifice will be meaningless if we don't act on the knowledge they died to reveal. If we don't demand access to the classified archives that contain ancient survival technologies. If we don't insist on public preparation for the cosmic threats that destroyed our predecessors. The cosmic cycles are approaching completion whether we're prepared or not. The astronomical forces that submerged the pre-flood cities are building toward another catastrophic peak. The same social dynamics that led to the collapse of ancient civilizations are accelerating in our own society. The question is whether we'll learn from the warnings encoded in underwater monuments before it's too late. Whether we'll overcome the forces of secrecy and suppression that keep crucial knowledge hidden from those who need it most. Whether we'll prepare as a unified species or fragment into competing groups that ensure mutual destruction. The ruins beneath the waves are calling out to us one final time, trying to share the wisdom that could save us from their fate. But we have to be brave enough to listen, even if the truth they reveal threatens the comfortable illusions that keep us docile and divided. Because somewhere in those classified archives, hidden in underground facilities around the world, lies the key to human survival. Ancient technologies that could power our cities through cosmic catastrophes. Communication systems that could coordinate global responses to planetary threats. Defensive capabilities that could protect our civilization from the forces that destroyed our predecessors. But this knowledge is only valuable if it's shared widely enough to implement on a civilizational scale. Keeping it secret, hoarding it for elite advantage, guarantees that it won't be sufficient to prevent the next collapse. The time has come to demand the truth, to insist on transparency from the agencies that recovered these ancient technologies, to force the disclosure of research that could help all of humanity prepare for what's coming. Because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate. Our own advanced cities joining the ruins beneath the waves, our own technologies failing when cosmic forces overwhelm our defenses, our own civilization adding another layer to the archaeological record of failed societies that ignored the warnings their ancestors tried to preserve. The choice is ours, but we have to make it now. The cosmic countdown is approaching zero, and the forces that destroyed the pre-flood world are stirring again. The only question is whether we'll have the courage to break the cycle of secrecy and suppression that has doomed every advanced civilization before us. The truth is waiting in the depths, preserved in stone and metal by ancestors who understood something we've forgotten. That knowledge is the only weapon that can save us from the cosmic forces that periodically reset human civilization back to zero. But we have to claim it before those forces complete another cycle of destruction and renewal. The clock is ticking, the waters are rising, and somewhere beneath the waves the final warning of a lost civilization echoes through the darkness, calling out to anyone brave enough to decode its message before time runs out completely. The evidence we've uncovered tonight paints a picture that should fundamentally change how we view our place in the cosmic order. From the geometric precision of Yonaguni's underwater terraces to the sophisticated harbour systems off Alexandria, from the deliberate preservation efforts at Mediterranean sites to the advanced astronomical computers encoded in submerged monuments, we're looking at proof that human civilization has walked this path before. But here's what makes this discovery so urgent, so critical that powerful forces will kill to keep it secret. We're not just studying ancient history, we're looking at our own future, written in stone by civilizations that face the same cosmic forces we're about to encounter. The astronomical alignments in these underwater monuments aren't just impressive demonstrations of ancient knowledge. They're countdown timers, warning systems, cosmic clocks that are still ticking toward the same catastrophic events that destroyed their creators. The mathematical constants encoded in their architecture aren't just evidence of sophisticated engineering. They're survival manuals, instruction guides for navigating planetary disasters that operate on scales beyond human control. And the most chilling realization of all, the countdown is almost over. When you analyze the astronomical data from these sites, when you decode the stellar positions and planetary cycles they tracked so meticulously, a pattern emerges that should terrify anyone who understands its implications. The cosmic forces that submerged these cities 12,000 years ago follow predictable cycles. Solar activity intensifies according to astronomical rhythms these ancient astronomers mapped with frightening precision. Magnetic field fluctuations occur in patterns they calculated and preserved in stone. Cosmic debris streams return to threaten Earth, according to orbital mechanics they understood better than we do. And all of these cycles are converging again right now in our lifetime. The groups that are eliminating researchers and suppressing evidence understand this. They're not just protecting academic theories or economic interests, they're racing against time to secure ancient survival technologies before the next cosmic catastrophe renders their current advantages meaningless. The classified underwater recovery operations, the secret archives, the systematic elimination of scientists who get too close to the truth all serve one purpose: ensuring that when civilization collapses again, only they possess the knowledge needed to rebuild from the ruins. But their strategy contains the same fatal flaw that doomed the pre-flood civilizations. You can't survive planetary-scale catastrophes by hoarding knowledge and abandoning the majority of humanity. The cosmic forces that destroyed advanced societies before operate on scales that require species-wide cooperation to overcome. No underground bunker, no classified technology, no elite survival group can withstand the full fury of cosmic catastrophes without the support and participation of entire civilizations. The pre-flood builders understood this. That's why they encoded their warnings in monuments designed to survive the very disasters that destroyed their cities. They weren't trying to preserve advantages for elite groups. They were trying to help future humanity prepare for threats that could only be survived through collective effort and shared knowledge. But we're making the same mistakes that led to their downfall. We're allowing crucial survival knowledge to be classified and hoarded, while the general population remains ignorant of the cosmic threats approaching our planet. We're permitting the elimination of researchers who try to decode ancient warning systems While secret agencies hoard technologies that could protect entire civilizations, the time for comfortable denial is over. The evidence is overwhelming, the timeline is accelerating, and the cosmic forces that periodically reset human civilization are building toward another catastrophic peak. The only question is whether we'll learn from the warnings our ancestors preserved in stone, or whether our own cities will join theirs beneath the waves when the cycles complete their ancient pattern of destruction and renewal. This isn't just another archaeological mystery to debate in academic journals. This is a survival manual written in stone by civilizations that face the same cosmic threats we're about to encounter. The underwater ruins aren't just evidence of lost worlds, they're libraries of knowledge that could save our world from following the same path to destruction. But accessing that knowledge requires courage. The courage to challenge institutions that profit from ignorance. The courage to demand transparency from agencies that operate in shadows. The courage to face uncomfortable truths about the cyclical nature of human civilization and the cosmic forces that shape our planet's history. The researchers who died trying to reveal these truths understood what was at stake. They sacrificed their lives to decode warnings that could save our civilization from repeating the catastrophic mistakes of the past. Their work represents our best hope for breaking the cycle of collapse and renewal that has plagued human societies for millennia. Now the choice is ours. We can continue to accept the comfortable lies that keep us ignorant and unprepared. We can allow the suppression of evidence to continue while elite groups hoard survival knowledge for themselves. We can remain passive while cosmic forces build toward another catastrophic climax that could destroy everything we've built. Or we can demand the truth. We can insist on access to the classified archives that contain ancient technologies. We can force the disclosure of research that could help all of humanity prepare for what's coming. We can work together to decode the warnings preserved in underwater monuments before it's too late to act on their wisdom. The cosmic countdown that began 12,000 years ago is approaching zero. The astronomical forces that submerged the pre-flood cities are stirring again. The same social dynamics that led to ancient collapses are accelerating in our own society. But unlike our predecessors, we have a choice. We can learn from their warnings. We can break the cycle of secrecy and suppression that doomed previous civilizations. We can prepare as a species rather than as competing factions. The ruins beneath the waves are calling out to us one final time, trying to share knowledge that could save us from their fate. The question is whether we'll have the wisdom to listen before the waters rise again, and our own advanced cities become monuments to humanity's failure to learn from the past. The truth is down there, waiting for us to find the courage to embrace it. The warnings are clear for anyone brave enough to decode them, and time is running out for us to prove that we're worthy of the sacrifice made by civilizations that tried to preserve their wisdom for our benefit. What we do next will determine whether human civilization finally breaks free from the cycle of catastrophic collapse, or whether we add another layer to the archaeological record of failed societies that ignored the warnings encoded in stone by those who came before us. The choice is ours, but we have to make it now, while there's still time to act on the knowledge our ancestors died to preserve. Because somewhere beneath the waves, the final countdown is ticking towards zero, and when it reaches that point, all the suppression and secrecy in the world won't protect us from forces that operate on cosmic scales beyond human control. The pre-flood cities survived 12,000 years underwater to deliver this message. The question is whether we'll prove worthy of their sacrifice, or whether our own ruins will join theirs on the ocean floor, waiting for some future civilization to wonder how we could have been so advanced, yet so blind to the lessons of the past.